On to another episode of Tech Fusion. I'm Hassan. Once you know where you want to go, once you have a passion, money, titles, and skill cannot limit you. On this episode,
Apple. From a garage to one of the largest companies in world history, the question must be asked, how did all of this start and just how big are Apple today? In this video, we'll take a look at the fascinating story of where Apple came from and then some facts. We'll then move on to the company's size and finally finish up with some conclusions. My name is Dagogo and thanks for joining me. Please get comfortable. This story is a pretty good one. Let's begin. The beginning of Apple was a true all-American story. You know how they say great things happen when you're in the right place at the right time? This is true for the foundation of Apple. The year is 1969 and the timing was perfect for some real innovation. It was a moment when the largest generation in US history, the baby boomers, were becoming adults, 80 million strong. It was an explosive shock to the system. They were dissatisfied with their country. They didn't want their friends and classmates going to war.
Well, I don't want to go to Vietnam because I don't want to get killed.
They wouldn't stand for any sort of discrimination. There were new ideas about what the world could be. It was a young revolution separate from mainstream America, a counterculture. In tandem with this, the microchip was in development and would be another revolution just on the other side of the decade. The place was also ripe for innovation as San Francisco was the epicenter of the counterculture movement. It would be during this mix of time and place in 1969 that a 14-year-old Steve Jobs would meet a 19-year-old Steve Wozniak. They were your run-of-the-mill students with a love for technology, pranks, and the Beatles. Neither of them had any idea that the two of them would soon change history. Steve Wozniak was always keen on computers.
And I took this book home that described the PDP-8 computer, and it was just like a Bible to me. I mean, all these things that for some reason I'd fallen in love with, like you might fall in love with playing a musical instrument. I fell in love with these little descriptions of computers on their inside. I could work out some problems on paper and solve it and see how it's done, and I could come up with my own solutions and feel good inside.
Wozniak shared a common dream among tech enthusiasts, the dream to own a personal computer, an impossible concept at the time. This all changed in 1974 with the introduction of the Altair 8800, a DIY microcomputer kit. Even though it didn't have any output apart from a set of flashing lights, it caused mass excitement and hysteria among tech enthusiasts. So much so that computer clubs began to pop up all around the US just to discuss all the cool things that you could do with an Altair 8800. One of such clubs was the Homebrew Computer Club in San Francisco. This club was different though. According to Jim Moran, founder of the West Coast Computer Fair, the general belief system of the Homebrew Computer Club was influenced by the counterculture happening around the area. For the club, this meant that helping each other and sharing everything was the norm. It was a team effort to figure out what the new Altair computer kit could do once it was put together. Meanwhile, Steve Wozniak was building his own computer. At this time, early CPUs from Intel and Motorola had just become publicly available, and Woz took advantage. Each week, Wozniak would bring his computer into the Homebrew Club with new improvements each time. He was too shy to put up his hand during the club session, so he would just set up his computer at the session's conclusion, but something would happen every time. People would start to crowd around and ask him questions. Steve Jobs, who also attended the club, noticed this and told Woz, "The two of us should really sell these things." So, starting in this garage in April of 1976, the two boys, with the help of some friends, got to work on the Apple I, a single circuit board with no included keyboard or monitor. This was officially the beginning of Apple Computer. The group of friends sold 50 Apple I's. To Steve, this was proof that people outside the club actually did want to own a PC.
It was very clear to me that while there were a bunch of hardware hobbyists, that could assemble their own computers, or at least take our board and add the transformers for the power supply and the case and the keyboard. For every one of those, there were 1,000 people that couldn't do that but wanted to mess around with programming. And so my dream for the Apple II was to sell the first real packaged computer.
Steve's vision of a ready-made PC was actually impossible at the time. It would take way too many chips, making it too expensive and too complicated. It just couldn't be done without some serious innovation. As it turns out, Woz didn't actually know it was impossible. He single-handedly used his mind to make an industry breakthrough.
And then I got into a way of, why have memory for your TV screen and memory for your computer, make them one? And that shrunk the chips down, and I shrunk the chips here. I looked through manuals and found a chip that did it in one chip instead of 5, and reduced that. And one thing after another happened. I wound up with so few chips. When I was done, I said, hey, a computer that you could program to generate colored patterns on a screen, or data, or words, or play games, or anything. And it was just the computer I wanted.
Steve Jobs added his design knowledge while insisting that the computer should be easy to use. This combination made the Apple II palatable to the consumer. Steve Jobs managed to get some investment money together for manufacturing. The PC was now a far cry from the hobbyist box with a bunch of lights and switches just 2 years earlier. The new company showcased the Apple II at the 1978 Computer Fair, and they stole the show outright. No one had ever seen anything like it. After this, Apple was off, literally exponentially.
I was worth